feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
Fellas, and the ladies.
There he is.
Oh, it is also National Women's Day today. So, and the ladies.
Shout out.
Shouts out to Tay, Nikki P, and also to Tanky's sister. Yeah. Also, what's her name again? Gigi, and also Gigi. Shout out. Welcome back to another episode of the Farm Podcast. I know you guys love that intro. That was a long one. Oh, Tanky is joining us today. Tank, and also Cody Mac Daddy. We've been giving him another name. Mac Daddy, Pimp Daddy, Puppy Champion.
All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. We are back. Hey, we're in season, Code.
Sir.
In season, and some normal things. In all of my years, there's some normal things that happen at this time of the year from a couple different areas, and I wanted to kind of touch on these, and I think these are big for this time of the year. Well, I'm going to be honest with you. You got, actually, I guess you could go everything all around, right? So you got the guys where everything is going amazing. Man, I'm 10 for 12. I'm unbelievable, but I've hit 4 jacks. I've never hit like this in my life, right? Everything I'm doing is working. All of that, awesome. All right, I got some news for you. The Valley's coming. All right, and it's not if, it's when. All right, the Valley is coming. I promise you. Okay, so we're gonna talk about that, right, and how to handle that if everything's going great for you, and knowing that the Valley's probably going to come, and what are you gonna do? How can you prepare for that before we get in? Also, you got a whole bunch of guys that's the extreme opposite. Man, I'm 0 for 20. I'm 0 for 15, right? Coach said my swing sucks, right? They're going to bench me. I'm already benched. I didn't start the year. I didn't start the year playing. I haven't been playing well. I thought I was going to start. Got all of that, right? And then you got a whole bunch of people in the middle that are just lukewarm, right? Okay, not bad. But, not hot or cold. It's just kind of in between, and I've been doing that too as well. So we're going to kind of talk through managing those things, and then also the private side of all that, like having your own private hitting coach, talking with your coaching staff about like the good, bads, uglies, all that stuff too. Some perspective that I've had, and also from you now too, Coda, stepping in this arena of these high schools. I know that there's a lot of conversations that come through with that, and managing all those things as well. Because that's one thing I know that we talk about a lot is one of the things I think that people don't understand that is a coaching conversation that we do a lot is training our hitters how to talk to coaches,
Right.
And how to communicate, right? We talk about that in school, right? That in school we never had those, like I know when I got to college, I took a class, like you have your public speaking classes. There's some people that have, obviously communication majors or, effective communication, things like that as well. But yeah, I mean, it's a crucial skill that obviously we need to have when we have disagreements or if we see things from different perspectives. Right. And more often than not, especially in those type of environments, players feel almost, I wouldn't say hopeless, but like maybe like they don't have leverage, right? Or they don't have a place where they could speak about certain things and express how they feel or what they're going through, and that maybe they don't have a voice more than anything. So yeah. What do you take just on the initial topic? I know we kind of just I was like, man, we should do a pod.
I think everybody that's played high school, college, beyond, or whatever has experienced this to some extent. I've experienced it myself personally. Having to learn how to communicate with coaches and how that's going to, how that would allow me to continue to progress and work on things, but also still have confidence. And then also to, from like a leadership standpoint, is communication between the players and the coaches. There does need to be some buddy or a group of people, in my opinion, that can kind of bridge that gap for what the coach is trying to get across. But maybe some kids, typically the ones that aren't the leaders at that point in time,
Yep.
To get the message across of what's really being said and what really needs to be done. So I definitely think it's a crucial topic, and it's definitely a skill set that, like you said, I talk to every one of our hitters at some point in time to some extent, some more than others, obviously, about how to communicate to coaches, trainers as well, whether they have other trainers on top of us too, just because it's a very important skill in life in general, let alone to be able to continue to do what you want to do on the field and off the field. So
yeah, you walked into my spider web, because I was gonna say the big thing is, I'm gonna spin it back biblical for a second, is that I think one of the big things that you have as well is, like, let's say it goes either way. Sometimes I'll have the same thing. It's like, man, like, wow, I've gone through seasons. Man, God is just blessing me so much right now. He's got me a building, and an investor came on board, and everything's going right. And like, we have this big project going, and this is going well. And we have this big project going on, and this is going well. And you have all those things going, and you're like, man, like, how amazing all those things are, right? And then all of a sudden, you're going to go through these valleys, right? Like, you could look at ours, for example, right? You could be like, man, just recently, and if you haven't heard, I'm sure you will by the end of this, by the time this podcast come out. But like, again, the same side of that, right? Like, we got broken into, like, oh man, that sucks, right? And then also too, insurance most likely isn't covered. Oh man, that sucks. Okay, awesome. Okay. Oh man, this client, like, they're not hitting well. Oh man, this client isn't hitting well. Like, oh man, like, okay, there's some things we have to work through on that side. So now you can look at that, and some people will start to do that and start to question, like, God, like, where are you at? Where are you at? Right? Like, you were with me, and now you turned your face from me, and you're not walking with me, right? And what's going on? Like, my whole life is in shambles, right? And you're riding this roller coaster,
right,
up and down hills and valleys, right? And you got your mountaintops and your valleys. And so sometimes I think on the same side of that, we start to naturally, as humans, we start to doubt, right, our shepherd, right? And let that be shepherd in the sense of God. Let that be our moms and dads. Let that be our coaches. Let that be our hitting coach. Let that be our private facility that we train at. Let that be whatever that is, right? We start to doubt these things, right? We start to doubt ourselves, our abilities, all of those things that come in, right? And that's a human characteristic that we all share, that it's a natural thing that doubt likes to slip in. But I also think on the same side of that is, look, like, the same thing is like when it says, like, God is the God of the hills and valleys, right? Is that with that is, I think more than anything, and I'll now take this into a business side, is something to think about with this is that, for example, when we go to invest, like when I go to invest in certain things for our business, and or if somebody is investing into our business or something like that, right? They're not investing, or I'm not investing in something, for example, that is going to solve all of my problems, or that it's always going to be right. So one thing that I pulled from, my business partner, and also, a good friend of mine, one of the things he always used to say, and the same side of that is, like, when I would make pitches to other businesses, or, other investors or anything like that too, he'd be like, hey, Joey, always remember that they're buying into you, not what you're selling, right? What you're selling is only 10%, right? 90% is you. And what that means is, like, hey, things are going to happen. Bad things are going to happen, right? Bad things are going to happen, right? You're going to go through valleys. Now, I'm investing in the character of the person and how they're going to respond in that, right? And so when things do go wrong, how do you recover? What's the mindset? Is everything going to fall apart? We're going to go gasoline here and just going to implode the whole thing? Right. But, what does that look like, right? When it comes into, like, tenacity, what does it look like to be gritty, resilient, all those other things, and to adapt and overcome, right? And so that becomes a major skill. I think there's a book called Grit, if you haven't read that book, that's based on, again, like, some of the top successful people in every single industry, and that one of the most common characteristic between all of them is their grit score and how gritty they were across the board. And so I think on the same note of this is, when we say baseball is an analogy of life, it's that same thing. Is just understanding that is that when we go into, baseball is going to be a lot like life. For example, Mike Trout last year went 0 for like 28 at one point, right? One of the best hitters in the world, right? Mookie Betts for the first quarter of the year last year was like batting in the hundreds, like was awful, was terrible, right? And then ended up finishing with a good year, but nobody remembers that. They just remember that he finished well, but he struggled. He was doing really awful at the beginning part of the year last year, right? And I think within baseball, like, I was talking about this in other sports. Sometimes we get this confused with all these other sports. For example, if you fumble 4 times in a row, you're not playing. If you drop, right, 10 passes, right, whatever that is, right, you're not playing, right? If you miss 10 shots in a row, like, you know, a lot of those, you're not getting the ball, right? Or they're going to, coach is going to be on you for, you know, keep shooting, right? So you have these characteristics within baseball where it's like majority of the time you're going to fail. Like you could, and stats are deceptive, especially when you don't have these underlying stats that are really important. So like some of the things, like let's say you're 10 for 10, right? You could be 10 for 10 with 5 bunt hits, right? Which is awesome. Good for you. You know, and also shout out to my boy, you know, lift small, bunt the ball. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to my boy. You know, you could have your 5 bunts. Awesome, right? That's in there too. Cool. And then also too, you got 4 hits on some BS, right? That, you know, barely skimmed through the infield, sliced over the outfield, whatever, right? Okay, awesome. Okay. Now you could look at that and go, oh, I'm 10 for 10. Like I had a guy I played high school with that batted over almost like 570 or something like that. And majority of his hits were like little ground balls to the infield, right? And he was just fast, right? So you can look at that and go, wow, man, like, okay, that's my batting average. Okay, great. I'm happy you're getting hits. That's none of those things. But my point is that you also have these other things that go into it. And again, that's why a lot of coaches employ those like hard hit percentage, barrels, you know, quality at bats, all these other things that actually give you a process rather than focused on the result necessarily there, that the process will lead to those results, right? How many quality at bats that I have today compared to how many hits that I have today? Because again, those valleys are going to come, right? And they could be either way. The stats could be deceptive, right? But I think one of the big things is just like, you know, with that going in is like, hey, one of the stages can immediately be is that when things go bad, I immediately want to make a change. And so let me give this analogy though too. It's like if you got sick, so you switch doctors. Like I got sick, so I went to the doctor. Right? Okay, well, yeah, but he's been going to you, and then all of a sudden he got sick, right? Or he got, you know, what is going on? Yeah, but that's the part of the mentor process. That's what you're here for in the first place, right? Is that one thing I've, you know, from my experience too, has been with really good coaches, they're not looking to place blame. They're immediately, like, for example, we have a player playing at a Power 5, and when they weren't hitting, their coach immediately reaches out and says, hey, what do you see? This is what we got. Did I do something? You know, did I do something wrong? Can we work on a session together? Can I hear, you know, again, what do you got? What are you guys working on? How would you go about fixing that? You're also their hitting coach, major league hitting coaches. A lot of times they do the same thing. They'll just reach out to me and say, hey, you know, this is what I've been seeing. What do you guys been working on? What do you got? Yeah, I was going to do this, you know, blah, blah, blah. Can you talk to the player? Like they utilize my relationship with the player to take it to that other level where a lot of other coaches that, you know, it's very easy to, like, there's this weird war that can be started between like private side and you know, high school coaches or college coaches or whatever, right? It's like, you know, you're not hitting because of this guy. It's like, again, it could go either way. It's like if you're blaming a high school coach, like your player's not hitting because he's on your team. Yeah. You know, and there's a lot of context obviously needs to be added there. But yeah, I mean, I think the same thing. I mean, I know I have some stories there. Let's talk about your what are some spells that you've gone through as a hitter?
Yeah. Well, first thing I want to point out is as I've grown up and matured just through my playing career and then also coaching, is I've realized how important it was to understand who was leading me and how they communicate. And so a really, you know, famous leader in our sports world, Nick Saban, down in Alabama. This past year, something that stuck with me that I thought was a really special story was there was a wide receiver in particular on their team that had caught a pass and fumbled in a very big situation. And he immediately, the next drive, was the very first person on a slant thrown to. And basically afterwards was asked about it, was like, you know, this is a really big situation. And he goes, we know who he can be and who he is as a player, and we didn't, just because he made a mistake, we didn't forget who he is. And sometimes I think players can forget who they are, which again, it's part of the maturing process as a player. Yeah. Every player at every level, at every age can go through that. I would
say not even just as a player, as a human, because again, in life, it doesn't matter, like right now, same thing too. When I go through adversity, right? Even now, maybe it's a higher level of adversity than I've faced in the past.
Right.
I can start to forget who I am, and I have to get regrounded, and I have to do this on a constant basis, right? So I think that maturation process is ever growing, right? And that you could be 80, right? You could be 15, right? You could be whatever age, like when you struggle, it's the same thing, right? It's but I definitely think, again, to your point though, it's a process that sports can help us learn, but it's a thing that we're gonna have to constantly do throughout our whole lives, for sure.
Yeah, but I thought that story was really special. One is he's an elite leader, Nick Saban is,
Yeah.
and he has a lot of incredible athletes that have played for him over the years, and for him to publicly talk about that process, and I don't want my player to forget who he is, and I didn't forget who he is, and so the first play, and also too, Nick Saban's not calling every play of every game, but he does have say.
Smart.
And the coaches, beneath him or lateral to him, however you
Yeah.
want to consider it, have say, and they're like, no, we're going to this guy first play, right? We're
coaching
going to
staff.
make
Yeah.
sure, which I think is a really important.
And pretty
really
smart too, because maybe the defense too on the same side of that
Didn't think
game strategy.
Right.
They're not thinking he's the first guy that's going to get the ball, so they put guys on somebody else, and then all of a sudden now he's a game player. He's gameplay, and I think literally like you're saying to the other side of that is like one of the stories I immediately thought of, because I actually gave some accolades to Beth at LSU last year, because even when like Taylor Pleasance last year, the beginning of the year, was really struggling, one of the things I said to her, I was like, hey, like, because she was crushing later in the year, and I went up and talked to her afterwards, and I was like, man, like how many coaches would have took her out of batting third? Right? She's batting third in the middle of the best offense that's, supposed to be, right? LSU, and that's a major program, right? So when like Taylor was struggling last year, one of the things I mentioned to Beth was just like how when I looked at that, and she said she actually talked to Howard, right? And Howard and her had the conversation of, for example, she said, I thought this was a great analogy. She brought it up and said, look, the team goes as she goes. If she doesn't hit, we're going to lose anyways. And I was like, wow. And then she goes, me and Howard talked about it and said, if Derek Jeter's struggling, do you take Derek Jeter out of the lineup? Do you move Derek Jeter? No.
Yeah, that's a killer.
No. You just leave Jeter where he is, right? And you let him be, and you trust that he's Jeter, right? And he's going to figure it out, and maybe he needs to fall through. Now, this year, Taylor's having an insane year, right? She's been crushing. She's the one that started the year crazy hot, right? That's where she was. Last year, she was the cold. She was the complete opposite, right? Again, she battled through some injury stuff early, and then some mental stuff, and then got her way through, right? But again, along with that, it's like each year's had some crazy contrast between what the season looked like this to open. And I thought that as a coach is like, how many coaches could not handle that, right? That they move them in the lineup. Oh, something's got to change. All that stuff. And I was like, also too, as a player, and you got to know your players and see how they're going to affect. Some people, would want to get pulled out of 3-hole. Hey, man, I just don't want the pressure, right?
Yeah.
Other players would be like, man, like the confidence you have in me, right? That you're not pulling me like I'm the 3-hole. Like, and if you have confidence in me, either I ball or I'm, we'll figure it out later. But at the end of the day, like I'm here for a reason. You haven't forgotten who I am, right? And that's what literally when you started talking about with the slang, I was like, I started thinking about that story was how I remember that. And, again, that's the calls that at a major program with the staff, those are the things where, for example, what does that lead into where Taylor was only a sophomore last year. Now she's a junior, right? And now she might crush for the next 2 years, and the relationship she's going to have with the staff, and remembering back when she was in her valley, how she was being treated, how people were talking to her, how her teammates responded, how her coaching staff responded to her, all those things. And, every day in and day out, like she stayed in the same spot in the lineup. There was crucial situations where she was struggling. I remember Taylor dropping down a bunt. Right. I remember, her coming up and being like, man, like she's cold right now. It'd be better if there's another hitter up right now, right? But nope, like never pinched hit for her. Never like, nope. If she's going to, I'm trusting that she's going to figure it out. And again, if we lose with her, okay, that's fine. But either she gets hot or we're going to lose anyways. So it is what it is.
Yeah, and I think, too, the communication component between the coaches and the players, super important in that process. Like you mentioned, like, hey, maybe this player in particular just doesn't like or can't handle the pressure of the 3-hole, 4-hole, the situations, and at this moment at least, right? You know, I mean, we've all played at that level. I mean, you get a freshman that comes in and, you know, crushes it and gets put in the 2-hole. It's like, okay,
Yep.
maturity-wise, talent-wise, more than able.
Yeah.
Maturity-wise, can they handle that?
Yep.
Hey, like, you are reliant on driving in runs now. Like,
Yep.
you're a dog. You're a guy.
Yep.
And, you know, at that time in their career or where they're at mentally, they might not. That doesn't mean at the end of the year they couldn't. Like,
No.
that's exactly like my personal situation.
Or maybe they didn't struggle
Yeah, they needed
because they're a baby and put them in the 2-hole. And,
Yeah.
you know, they might suck this year, but next year they're going to be your leader. Junior and
100%.
senior year might lead your program, and now they have that experience of batting in the 2-hole. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's where, too, when you ask, like, some personal stuff, like, you know, I basically, my whole college career, batted ninth. You know, I batted leadoff my freshman year, and then I batted ninth my sophomore year.
Yeah.
You know, flipped,
Yep.
and then went to, you know, after JUCO, batted ninth.
Mm-hmm.
And then my last year, actually, you know, first time ever not batting first or ninth, I hit seventh, which, you know, in my heart, that hurt a little worse than ninth, honestly. But, you know,
You're like, I'm second lead
I was
off, baby.
I convinced myself on this, but then, you know, by the end of the year, I'm leading off.
Yeah.
And two, there's those, again, the ups and the downs and the peaks and the valleys. But again, what I would say for me personally was what changed really wasn't anything I did physically. I was still always one of the first people there, last to leave, hard worker, blah, 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 blah. You know, all the prereq stuff that, you know, a lot of kids, you know, have and should have to be in some of those positions. But I would say the biggest thing that changed was I had finally communicated with my coach how I felt, what I felt was going on, what I was trying to do. And so there wasn't a gap. And really, they didn't tell me I was right or wrong.
Yeah.
They just listened.
Yeah.
Which I know is, again, a particular coaching staff, for them to have the willingness to listen to me.
Yeah. Well, and
was
also,
huge.
but also a particular player that's willing to communicate.
Right.
And that's and that's where I think it's the other thing as well. It's like, hey, like you said, right? It's really hard as a coaching staff when I'm just sitting from the outside and things aren't going your way. It's just like, are you doing anything? Are you moving? Right? It's like when we're not aligned with God, right? It's like, are you doing anything? Are you moving?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are you doing right now? Right? Like, I don't have any perspective. Like, what are you what are you doing? Right? And then we go back to the opposite way, where when you do get that perspective and you realize where God has been moving in the background, right? Then that's where it says, like, when you don't know, you can't see God's hands, like, trust God's character, right? Is that same mindset is like, that boy is just falling and trying to hold his eyes open. That's so funny. We're talking about Tanky over here fighting for it. There he is. He's just fighting to stay up. You know, again, on the same side is like, obviously, as you build rapport with the athletes, you're like, hey, like, I know he's working on things. He's not up there just like sucking. Like, for example, I'm going to use this analogy too with it, is like, let's say one of our players in here is really struggling with something, right? Me, with the rapport and relationship I have with you, I'm not sitting here thinking, well, man, Cody's just really just not working with these guys, and he's doing blah, 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 and he doesn't care, blah, blah. You know, like, again, my mindset is, along with it, is like, look, I know Cody will do everything underneath the sun, right? And is, again, very aware of the situation. We'll do everything underneath the sun to get your, son to hit or wherever that is, right? So
Or daughter.
Yeah. And so,
Shout out.
yeah, make sure it's slide in there. National Women's Day, that's what I'm talking about, baby. But yeah, it's just that same mindset. It's like, look, like, we're going to do everything. And I know that our whole staff has that heart, is that we're not just like, oh, we're going to collect some money from you guys and whatever happens. Like, no. Like, I'm in here with it. Like, if I'm your biggest fan, right? Like, you're the biggest fan, right? I work with you day in and day out. I have this, especially with you within your performance and how you're doing. It's like, like, I'm in here with you. I'm in here with you. I'm not pointing fingers, and the same thing, like, protecting my ego. At the end of the day, like, all that stuff, again, we've built a staff and a culture with that's like, it's not about, what's going on. The whole point is about, again, how do we respond? How do we recover, right? We can sit here and point, but we're not getting anywhere. And at the end of the day, a lot of times what ends up happening, especially in those relationships, is, let's say somebody goes 0 for 19, something like that, right? They switch hitting coaches. They were in a valley. They were slumping for a second. Then all of a sudden they switch hitting coaches and they get 3 hits. Oh my God, that fixed it.
Yeah.
No, dude. I had a couple tough weeks. First off, again, maybe I was hitting balls hard. Guys were diving, making plays, jumping, whatever, all these other things, right? Maybe on the same side of that, I matched up against some of the toughest opponents that I'm going to have for 3 games in a row, and I put a whole bunch of pressure on myself because I needed to be the starter and I needed to be this, or maybe I needed a fire lit underneath me, right? Maybe I needed to suck. Maybe I was getting a little cocky. Maybe I was doing whatever that was, right? Like maybe that's part of it too. I remember one day in college, the same thing, right? It was a doubleheader, right? And I went 0 for 9 with 7 Ks, right? And even the 2 balls I hit, they weren't great. It was like to the pitcher, like, topped, like 2 to the pitcher. And I was just like, and finally my coach benched me. And I was just like, some people would take that as punishment, like, oh, he didn't have confidence. I was like, thank God. Like, thank you. Like, please, I'm not in the right mindset, right? I'm putting all this pressure on myself. And I've had pro hitters that have done that too, where they go 0 for, 19 and they've struck out 12 times, right? And I'll ask them, I'm like, hey, are you physically that bad? Like, does your swing that bad? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, okay, so let's own 4 or 5 of those Ks. Fine, right? What about the other 7? Well, yeah, I was in my own way, blah, 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 those things. I'm putting all this pressure on myself, all these things. Okay. Now, that's part of you as a hitter, too, your mindset and how you recover from that. But again, sometimes we forget. Tank's out now. Go ahead and switch the cam just so that people could see. Oh, it's a low. Like, I got you on a tilt. Here. There he is. Snoozed out. But no, and then also, too, like sometimes we got we got that mindset that, hey, like, the burden is the blessing. And we always just want the blessing. We see blessing as things are always going well in my life. Well, the valley is a blessing too. The valley is where I actually develop my skills so that when I do get to my mountain, it isn't just a peak and I immediately fall back into my valley again. Anybody could get there, but staying there, right, is a whole nother thing, right? And being able to perform at this other level. Or when I do have a valley, it's a lesser valley where I don't plummet back to opposite way because I didn't actually learn any skills on the way up, right, of climbing. I took that elevator up, right? But the problem is the next mountain doesn't got an elevator, right? Now I have to climb the mountain. I didn't learn any climbing skills the first time. Someone took me on a helicopter to the top. And now when I actually have to do it, right, I haven't developed the skills. And that's where the burden, it actually becomes the blessing, is my struggle is my strength, right? And so I think on the same side of that is like, you got to be knowing that, and this is where let me change gears into the guy that's 10 for 10, right, with 8 extra base hits. Awesome, right? You're crushing it this year, right? Don't have confidence that you're only going to get hits.
Right.
Don't have confidence in your stats. Have confidence that if things go wrong, right, you still know who you are, right, and that you'll figure it out. And I'm grateful when things are great. I'm grateful when I'm at top of the mountain, but I also need to be grateful when I'm in the valley because I know I'm learning and becoming a better hitter now. And all of this is just feedback. And sometimes it's false feedback each way. Right. Sometimes I actually am playing. I'm out. Zach Walters back in the day, he used to say this when me and him would talk. He would say, it's never as bad as you think and it's never as good as you think, right? You're never as good as you think you are, right? You're not. But you're also not as bad as you think you are. Yeah. You're somewhere there in between, in the middle, right? And, you're right. You're not an 0 for 12 hitter with 9 Ks or whatever, right? But you're also not 15 for 15 with 8 doubles, all right? Or 8 homers, whatever, right? You're not that guy either, right? That's just you at your best and that's you at your worst, right? How you manage the middle is where you become, again, how well you manage the middle. And that's what we, give that analogy. The same thing. I think I always mix up who it is, but it might have been Lou Gehrig or Ted Williams or something like that, right? When he gives the story where he's like, look, I got 500 bats a year, right? There's 100 of them that I'm absolutely terrible. Like, a little leaguer could get me out, right? And then I got 100 at bats where you couldn't get me out. I don't care if you're Randy Johnson. Every single, pitch, I'm locked in. How I manage those 300 in between is what makes me a hitter, right? Do I just give them away? Do I just fold, right? Now do I have, 300 bad at bats because I'm, again, because of how I manage that time? And so I think that that's also the big thing too, is like, when you look into that, think about that in life, right? Let's say over your lifetime, you got 500 at bats, right? And you got much more than that, but let's say you got 500 at bats, right? 100 of those, you're going to be terrible. Like, again, someone that's younger with less experience with all those things could have made a better call, right? You fumbled the bag. Okay, right? Then you have 100 where you can't miss, right? The market conditions are perfect. You recruited the best players. Everything's falling your direction. Right. It's amazing. Great. You can't get out if you wanted to, You got too much momentum.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got the 300 in between, right? The market isn't in a perfect spot. The market isn't in a terrible spot, right? That everything isn't falling your way, everything isn't falling away from you, but where you are in the middle on how you manage that, right? And again, that's where baseball, again, goes in with life. Now, are you going to, let's say when you're in that, 100 at bats where everything's going terrible, you're going to go home and blame your wife?
Mm.
You're going to go home and blame your kids. You're going to go home and blame your coaching staff. You're going to go home and blame everybody else. It's my boss. It's my this. It's my that. They're the problems. They're the reason, all these other things. Look, it's never as bad as you think you are. That's all also too. And you've also identified with your results. Stop that. It does. Again, at the end of the day, all of that is feedback. And on the same side of that, I'll have you touch on this too, is I know this is spider web for you because we just recently happened, is we don't need to go to the extreme, either no adjustments or crazy radical adjustments.
Right.
There's things in between that with that as well. And why don't you kind of open that up too?
Yeah, I think too, like you mentioned earlier, when things aren't going well, is, hey, I'm just gonna abandon ship. I'm gonna go do something completely different, right? That's human nature. We want to just completely abandon everything, but
Yep.
also too,
Everything's wrong.
yeah, everything's wrong, no matter what you do. But
Everything's terrible.
yeah, you could do everything perfect, but the result's gonna come out
Yep.
over.
Yep.
It just doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
And then too, you have the conviction in what you're doing, where no matter what's going on, I'm just not going to make any adjustments. I'm just going to keep doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like
Everything's
I have
right. I'm perfect.
So much
Yeah.
confidence or conviction or arrogance in the process and what I'm doing that, I'm 0 for 10 with 8 Ks, and I'm just not going to change anything because I'm
For sure.
doing everything perfect. Well, also too, like you said, everything's feedback. If you're 0 for 10 with 8 Ks, like probably not perfect.
Yeah.
And two, also it's baseball.
And it
so
might be
never perfect.
And it
So,
might be something like you said, like subtle there, right? Where you're right. It might not mean that I need a full swing change right now,
No.
but it could mean that, for example, in game, like you're saying, is it could be a mindset adjustment. Maybe you're going into those at bats, and it might have nothing to do with your swing physically.
Right.
It could have everything to do with, again, pressure you're putting on yourself. I got to start. I'm in spring. I have pro guys all the time. I'm in spring training. I'm only getting 1 at bat a game. They go in there, dude. First off, the pendulum is not even in your. Right now, everything's kind of stacked against you, right? You got the pitchers are at their peak.
Yeah.
This is when they feel the best. Their workload has been the lowest.
Right.
They're ready to go. Hitters timing's off. They feel like they're He-Man. Every pitcher looks amazing typically in spring training, right? They only got an inning. They run out there, let it eat, and they're a starter or whatever, and then you won't see them again, right? But you're going out there like, man, everything's against me. Everything's against me. Oh, they're only giving me 1 at bat, all these other things. When mainly the mindset could also be an alteration shift of you going like, man, what a blessing and a gift it is that I get to bat right now. When I was a little boy, if you would have told me I get 1 at bat in spring training, I'm in. Like I'd have been up there like
Yeah, 100%.
juiced, right? Not oh, it's the 8th inning and this guy's throwing 90. I've been like, bro, I don't care.
Yeah.
If you throw Randy, I got to face Randy Johnson.
Yeah.
Like I got to face this guy was throwing 98 and I had a chance and I got a hit, right? But instead, when you start viewing it that way and you start this perspective is flip flopped, then you start like having resentment for the bat, right? Like I was doing is like, man, I don't even want to hit today, bro. Like bench me, coach. I'm done with this stuff, right? And that's where you're kind of talking about too. It's not all or nothing
Yeah.
and everything in between. Yeah.
Well, and that's what too. I watch quite a bit of golf here and there when I have free time. It's just always been interesting to me, and I always think it's interesting when you can kind of watch their process, and they're talking about with their caddy like, hey, this is how I've been hitting this club recently, and here's the lie, and here's the particular hole we're on, and this is how I've been hitting this club, so maybe I'm not going to go with this club, but on the next hole, I might use this club based on the lie and what hole it is, right? It's like,
Yeah.
it's not a drastic, like, he's not changing his whole, swing. It's not, he goes 1 club up, 1 club down, just a slight change, right? Based on the environment, the situation that's going on, right? Or, hey, I'm going to swing this exact same club 75%. Like, I'm going to just swing this club slightly different, a slight mindset change. I'm going to try to drop this thing at, 100 instead of 150 yards, And and I like that analogy or that thought process through golf, because in baseball, I think it's so easy to go extreme. Like,
Yeah.
hey, I'm going to go from I love this one growing up is you got your ace swing and you got your two strike. There's like nothing in between. It's like,
Yeah.
well, so you got your all or nothing haymaker punch, or you got your just
Yeah.
little, like, I'm just going to tap you. Like,
Yeah.
there's so much in between that when
Yeah,
it
for
comes
sure.
to every sport. Like,
Yeah.
that's like saying, I'm going to shoot a half court shot or I'm going to shoot a layup. Like, bro, what?
Yeah, or you just said like literally within like just the sport of literally like MMA, right? Or boxing or something like that. I don't have a haymaker or just a counter punch and that's it, right? I have all these other punches and options I can go to within particular situations, within certain spacing, within all these things that I can get off these other type swings. And like I think that's the same thing with that is like, hey, this guy's charging me. Right, like when Aldo charged McGregor, right, and he steps back and whack, and it's this, this counter hook. Well, his counter hook, right, is nasty. Now, is it his number one punch, right? No, but it's also now his hook and his left hand, especially his straight left hand, is his number one punch, right? But that's an amazing option for the situation, right? That he's going to as the guy steps in, whack, he hits him with that check hook, right? And so that's such an amazing option. And again, it leads to a knockout there. And that's that part of like learning as a hitter, right? Is because some people argue, and I've definitely argued this point as well, right? Like, yeah, Trout's going to go 0 for 28, but he's not going 0 for 28 against your high school teams or something like that, right? But also, too, he matured to that point, right? Where when he was in high school, not saying that he went 0 for 28, right? But just to say that on top of that, right, there's times where he didn't hit, right? There's times where he went and struggled, too. And also, too, you got to remember on the same side of that, yeah, if your basement was still, like Trout's basement is 99% of everybody in the entire world that plays baseball, right, is your ceiling, right? Not even your ceiling. He's still his worst day is still that, right? So you got to understand that too. He's so good that when he's bad, he's still pretty good, right? How good are you when you're bad, right? It's that other side. Now again, that's a mixture. It's not just movement, strength, athleticism, all that other stuff too. It's all of these things where they fought. It's that speech, inch by inch. We're going to get them inch by inch, right? You build up every different facet where, again, his mental game, his athleticism, his strength, all these things all raise his basement. They all raise his basement so that he has an opportunity to do that, right? So like that becomes on that same side of that is like, again, one of the main points that I'd really want to drive home is when these things are happening with you, within your team, is like, first off, all your hitting coaches, all your coaches should be on the same team.
Right.
Because we all want the same thing. Yeah. What does the private side not want the guy to hit? Yeah. Does the hitting coach at the school, does he not want the guy to hit? Does the head coach at the school not want does the strength guy he has not want the guy to hit? Everybody wants the guy to perform, right? So if you start having that mindset, and you're not assuming like, oh, this guy's trying to get money from you and this guy's trying to do this and the high school coach doesn't know what he's talking about because of this X, Y, and Z. No. We're all on the same team, right? We're all pulling the same boat in the same direction when it comes into where we want to go. Now, we might disagree on how we're going to get there.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Right? But also, too, on the same side of that, like as a head coach, at some point, you hire your coaches, right? And that would be us as well, right? Like there's these other people that are on your staff, right? Just remote. And a different location that are trying to help you achieve the same goals. We all want the same goals, right? We all want to win. We all want the player to perform, right? Now, when you open that door and you go and have that conversation, that opens up a whole nother thing. And you should know again, great hitting coaches in the MLB now know all the private hitting coaches and build relationships because they know that those guys are going to go and hit. Yeah. High school coaches need to do the same thing. You should know locally all the guys that they hit with. They're going to go hit with them no matter what. You don't have the time to hit with everybody. Yeah. Also, too, on the same side of that, again, the private coach doesn't want the guy not to hit either. Again, it's bad for business. Yeah. It's not good for the player. And again, with the relationships that we have with players, the last thing we ever want is for somebody to struggle or whatever that is. And the same exact thing for the high school coach too. The same thing. Like, hey, if you're doing something at practice that might be hindering them, let's say they're not even hitting at practice because you've been prioritizing other things. Let's say the stuff that you are doing at practice is hindering maybe the approach that you have as a team is hurting them. Maybe you're making every player take first pitch strike. Right? Maybe these things are really problematic, right? And at the end of the day, we all want results. Right. So we need to have that relationship where we can, we could talk about these things and figure that out. Right. And also, too, you should also want that as well because, again, private facilities, guess what? We got youth guys, too. Yeah. You don't think that we recommend what high schools they should go to?
Yeah.
right? So all of the top hitting coaches, all the top coaches in town that have some of the top programs, we generally have pretty good relationships with,
Yeah.
right? Because their players are going to come train with us, and on top of that, they know that we're like a feeder for them. We feed into those programs. The programs that you have, and then also too, we have programs that are not as good, but the coaches also use this as a resource to help develop their teams.
Yeah.
And that all comes back to, again, on the end of that is just like that, obviously that egoless, as a head coach, what you can actually do to get guys results. But I do want to put on that same side of that is like, hey, the one thing I just want to drive in there is when things go bad, remember that on the same side of that is the character of your coach or who you're going to. And again, if that coach, when all of a sudden you're not hitting bad, starts pointing fingers, and all of a sudden, or on the other side of that, starts blaming you or any of this, like, no. Like, hey, character be like, hey, there's a problem. It's me and you against the problem.
Right.
Not me versus you.
Right.
Right? That's where it becomes an ego thing. When in reality, like, we're on the same team, man.
Right.
Like I'm a resource for you. I never want to be your only resource. I think you should have multiple resources, but bring that information. Let's talk about it, right? I'm not afraid for you to have other doctors' opinion.
Yeah.
That's fine. But on the same side of that, like, we got to talk about what's actually going on. So like someone can actually help. Because the same thing's going to happen, right? Let's say you went 0 for 15, right? And then all of a sudden you go see another hitting coach. Other guy starts hitting. First off, 0 for 15, I wouldn't even consider a slump or whatever that is. That's not even a lot of at-bats.
Yeah.
That's like 4 games. So like you go into those same things, like, and you look at that and you go, okay, hey, here's the problem, right? How do we fix the problem? This is what I'm struggling with. And it becomes that relationship. And that's where, when I go through that, for example, with God, right? Let's say I go through a valley, right? God brings me through it. Well, guess what? Next time when I'm entering a valley, I'm going to run back to God again, right? But now this time, it's a little bit more adversity. I'm struggling a little bit more, and I start to battle with my faith, right?
Right.
Okay, well, I follow him but this time, God, it's been 5 months, right? Okay, boom. Next time it happens, something's only happening for 2 months, blah, 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 it's to this degree. Well, yeah, I have no problem trusting God. Well, guess what? A year from now, all of a sudden, these things happen, and man, I've been having a bad year. You know what? Do I still have trust in God? Do I have faith that he's going to deliver me? You know what? I'm Noah. I have 100 years. He told me to build this ark, right? What does my faith look like? For 100 years, when people are making fun of me, telling me what, my relationship, my God, my sky daddy, my, imaginary friend, my X, Y, and Z, right? All those things happen. Okay, great. What does that relationship look like where adversity is constantly, again, going to make you lean more into your faith or pull away, and your distrust is going to be there? And I think the same thing, too, is like, as we build that relationship with God, we also have a relationship with other human beings, including our coaches, including our parents, including these other things, is that my confidence doesn't come from me getting hits. Right? My confidence doesn't come. My confidence comes that if I don't get hits, it's okay.
Yeah.
If I don't get hits, we're going to figure it out. We're going to keep. It's not okay like I want to fail.
Right.
It's okay like, one, okay, that doesn't mean that I'm a terrible baseball player, right? Also, two, it doesn't mean what people think about me as a baseball player shouldn't have a dictation on who I am as a person and my confidence in myself, and or if I have any value.
Right.
As a human being, because I went 5 for 5 today, so I have value. But tomorrow I go 0 for 5 and I have no value.
Yeah.
Again, that's a roller coaster that you don't want to ride, especially within baseball, right? And parenting, coaching, you don't want to encourage that environment by always rewarding your kids for again, reward them for process. Right? Don't reward them because I got 5 hits today. Reward them for process and how well they stuck to that process and the culture that builds, because that will lead, like, again, when Nick Saban, another example, where he goes, we don't worry about winning. If we do what we need to do, we'll win. Right? Like, that's what I worry about my process. If I worry about my process, the wins will come, the hits will come, the homers will come, the doubles will come. I'm focused on my process. And even too, sometimes, again, don't forget that process is what you were using during the fall when you were crushing. That process is what you were doing during the summer when you got looks. That process is also happening. For example, like, you take certain things like, hey, during the fall I crushed. When I went and played for Team USA, I crushed. And then all of a sudden I started struggling in season, and now it's my process. Right? That all of that needs to change. It needs to be radically changed.
Yeah.
No. What I was doing when I was crushing is the same thing I'm doing now. Now, do I might need to take a slight alteration? Sure.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to talk about approach-wise. Maybe we need to change something that's happening mechanically. Maybe my swing has changed since fall, since those other things. Okay, let's talk about those things rather than falling into this radical the sky is falling. The sky is falling. Nothing else matters. Let's melt the house. Burn. I got one tire pop. Let's pop all the 4 tires and throw a brick through the windshield. It's just like, again, like calm down. It's not a complete loss, right? I don't need to go buy a whole new car, right? And that's where it becomes, again, that maturation process is knowing how to manage that in between and knowing that that process is, again, then as you get experiences and you become that more mature hitter, just like, again, I get more mature in my faith, is now when crazy things happen, it's like I trust so much in God's character now and how, again, how he's going to work in my life. Right. And if it's not good, he's not done. And me trusting in those things that, again, I can run back into that, right? And that's why it's so important to stay plugged in. It's so important to have those conversations. It's so important to be in community, to be reading the word, to be all those other things. Maybe it's a reminder, looking back at my old footage, maybe all these things, right, where I'm plugged in and having some of those things as well. And also, it might just be a thing where I fell away, where I stopped having fun and I made it a job, right? And now I'm putting all this pressure on myself because my perspective, again, I've slipped in perspective. Everything else is the same except for my perspective.
Right.
And my perspective has now changed. And maybe that's what I need more than anything is a perspective switch. And that's why I think things like, oh man, I'm going to wear these yellow panties because these are what make me hit, right? It's things like that, right? These type of slump buster activities, right, that all players will do in one thing or another to break out of a slump, right? If that's, whatever, spinning around 5 times, wearing these socks, whatever those things are, they can help with the perspective change of, like, they give hope. They can give me a moment of hope there, right? If you want some more insight on that, baseball players, make sure you go read Jesus by the Well, okay? If you go drink this water, you don't need no more hope from anywhere else, all right? You don't need no extra water, all right? I'm just plugging that real quick. But I think that's a big piece, is just like understanding that, is that, again, if I'm riding that roller coaster, it's going to be a long road. It's going to be really hard to navigate.
Yeah. No, and I think, too, from the last couple of years transitioning from playing to coaching, it's just really reiterated to me how much power coaches and parents have in players' lives.
Yep.
And really being aware of what you're saying and telling them and showing them. That ultimately, as a player, there's nothing I wanted more than my coach to just be proud of what I was doing and agree and enjoy watching me, commit to their process, right?
Yep.
And a lot of players, and you got players out there that don't care, but for the most part, a lot of players, they just want to, they want to please you as a coach, and they want you to be happy with them. And same thing as a parent, and
it to be unconditional, right? That it's not like when I'm 5 for 5 and I'm your best buddy on the team, and then I'm 0 for 5, and then you don't want to talk to me today, or you're not going to give me a ride home, or you're the parent in my ear on the way home, like, man, why are you doing that? You're embarrassing our whole family. It's just like, all right, bro, calm down.
And with that too, though, is as a player, I was this way. I would literally do what you would tell me, and it was a cue that was to try to get me to do something different. But I would literally do what you were telling me, thinking like, hey, I want you to just pound this into the ground. I will literally pound the ball straight into the ground. And too, like the cue that they were doing, they're seeing something, they're trying to get me to overcorrect what I was doing mechanically, right? But I will literally go to ends meet. I'm going to hit that ball straight down.
Yeah.
Right? And then I'm still 0 for 10. How am I supposed to, how am I supposed to play? I'm 0 for 10.
Yeah.
But I'm doing what you say.
Yeah.
And so understanding that power that you have as a coach and as a parent with players from someone who's not too terribly far removed from playing and can speak with conviction on that is super important. And then same thing as a coach is that's helped me really understand, like, hey, and that's why communicating, again, going back to it, is so important. Like, hey, this cue, this is what I'm telling you to do. This is what I want you to feel.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like.
For
right?
sure.
You're not hitting the ball off home plate right now. I'm telling you to think about hitting it off home plate or feel like you can. But the results, a line drive over the shortstop's head, whatever.
For sure.
Right? It's like I don't literally want you to hit it off home plate, and that's where that communication. Why I think that's so important. But understanding the power that you hold as a coach, and we hold as coaches with a lot of these players is super important as well when it comes to the adjustments. And also too, if they were to come to one of us and say, here's the deal, and then we start hey, it's everyone else's fault. We're perfect. We're not making any adjustments. That type of player.
For sure.
That's also
Yeah.
that power that we hold. Like we're training that player to then do that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not the problem. It's there. Well, now
Yeah.
I'm going to go to a different school, and then a different school, and then a different school,
Well, and then-
a different school.
and-
Well, now you've got 4 schools under your belt,
For sure.
and you've gotten 1 year of eligibility. Like you've only used 1 year of eligibility. Like
For sure.
you've never.
You can't
played.
just run from place to
Yeah,
place and learn
right.
how to communicate from well. And I think
Yeah.
I think the other part is like you just get into is that same thing of just like, hey, and again, would challenge all coaches and leaders, parents, all those other things too, and you as a player as well, is, like these interactions and like how you deal with this stuff is like, look, if you don't keep growing, and this is the challenge for coaches, parents, all those things, if you don't challenge, your own mindset, and your mindset is it's somebody else's fault and all these other things, and you haven't grown, and you haven't grown in those areas, well, guess what? Your traumas, your things are going to leak into your players.
Them, yep.
Your insecure leaders create insecure followers.
Yep.
That's how it all works. Anybody that's looking, and then again, in this place of not abundance, but the opposite side, scarcity, right? It has this scarcity mindset. You're going to push that into your players that, oh my God, it's running from me. This guy is falling, right? Because you're the leader. So they're seeing that from you. If you all are painting that picture all the time, that's how they're always going to feel. And so before we kind of get in to prayer here, is like, well, kind of leave with this quote, right? Is the, we get into with Edgar Martinez, right? With that quote I always say, right? Is he talked about, he's like, the difference between me and a young hitter is when they're 0 for 10, they start to doubt their ability. When I'm 0 for 10, I know I'm due. And that difference in mindset, right, is just like he knows who he is. He hasn't forgotten who he is. I'm Edgar Martinez. They're going to name awards after me. You know what I'm saying? I'm a Hall of Fame hitter. This is what I do. I hit. I figure things out. I overcome. Not I go 10 for 10, right? It's my process, who I am, my character, all of those things. Is like, this is what makes me good. It's not that I don't go 0 for 10. It's how I respond. Right. And also I know who I am. And again, I haven't forgotten who I am in my position. So on that note, let's pray it out, huh, Code? All right. Look at Tank. Good job, boy. Dear Father, thank you so much for bringing us here. God, just ask that all the coaches, players, everybody around the nation, the God that is looking for hope in these moments, and also too may be on top of the mountain or maybe in the valley. May you remind them that you're the God of the valley and the mountaintops, and that you're always there. And our confidence should become from leaning in you and not leaning into our own understanding or what we see with our eyes, but our faith. And also to let that be the light that guides us, and that we don't get distracted by the storms or the sunshine, God. And also too, not by the blessing, not that we're walking on water, but that you're the one that's helping us walk on water, and just keep our eyes focused on you. We know that when we keep our eyes focused on you, you're going to lead us through a way, and even sometimes what we perceive as burdens are the blessing in disguise. And remind us of that, God, and we pray all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Well, until next time, Farm System out.